Good morning. Hello, can you all hear me? Is that good enough? Hello, hello, hello. Testing, testing, testing. Are we loud enough to hear me? Good morning, everyone. Thanks for joining this morning. Please bow your head. Heavenly Father, thank you for our time together this morning. Please open our minds and hearts to the message we're about to hear this morning and to understanding and sensing and supporting those who are dealing with mental health crises around us, among us, within us. We bless this time and this message to you. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen. Before introducing our speaker, this hits a little close to home for me. So in my day job, I work in employee benefits. So I help companies manage their benefits, and part of that is actually looking at claims data, medical claims data on aggregate. And the most interesting thing I've noticed over the last couple years is since the COVID pandemic, the number of people taking medications for mental health has tripled, in some cases quadrupled with our clients. And those are the good clients. We've actually been warning our clients for years. Those that have not seen that uptick means not that they don't have mental health challenges within their population, they're just not seeking the help they need. And this year in particular, as I've been working with some clients, those that have not seen that uptick, we're seeing the ramifications of that. We've got admissions for mental health crisis, substance abuse, self-violence that has occurred from people who have this condition, and especially within both the workforce and our youth. It's very real. It's impacting our lives, and so we're excited for this session together to kind of continue to raise the awareness, I think, that exists around the need for mental health crisis. So Dr. Madison is here this morning. She has a BA in psychology from Azusa Pacific University, a master's in Psych D from Fuller Theological Seminary. She is the postdoctoral clinical fellow at Northside Hospital in the Behavioral Health Services Department and the Atlanta Innovation Council Center, which is a partner here at Trinity and provides a lot of help and resources to our members and our community. Please join me in welcoming her this morning.
Well, good morning. Let me make sure I have this a little lower. Can you guys hear me okay? Okay, great. Well, glad to be here with you all this morning. Like he said, I'm Dr. Madison, and today I'm going to talk a little bit about kind of my professional journey and then talk about some general mental health trends that we're seeing kind of I know last week was a trauma surgeon. Yes, so this week will be a little more therapy / more general mental health information and talking about some trends as well as some resources. It won't be all bad news. We'll talk about some good things too. So we'll go ahead and get started. I wanted to just start, if you all are willing, and you don't have to, just to kind of get a gauge of where we're all at with how comfortable we are with this topic, kind of on a scale of 1 to 5, if you're willing to hold up your hand. 1 would be, I don't know a ton, or maybe I don't care a ton about this topic, or I'm kind of uncomfortable with it. 5 would be, I've talked about this a lot, or maybe I have my own experience, or I feel really comfortable talking about this. If you're willing, just show of hands, 1 to 5, what your comfort is with this. Okay, great. Lots of 5s. Maybe the ones just aren't holding their hands up, which is okay. That's great. That gives me a good gauge, and we'll talk more about why it can be hard for us to talk about mental health too. Okay, perfect. This works from here. This is our agenda. Again, I'll talk a little bit about my professional journey and then talk through some trends, some resources, and then we'll have a little bit of time, hopefully at the end, for some question and answer. I'll have someone help me pass out some note cards too if you would rather write down your question and have me read it. If you don't feel like raising your hand, that's great too, and I can make some time to read those. And feel free to jump in at any point with a question or a comment if you want to add something. I'm very informal, so you don't have to wait until the end to ask any questions. So feel free to jump in at any point. This is all like educational stuff, so I'll talk a little bit about my education, which was already named bachelor's at Azusa Pacific University, and then my master's and graduate degree from Fuller Theological Seminary in Pasadena. And most people, or not most, a lot of people don't know that sometimes seminaries can have schools of psychology as well, which was actually very important to me. Finding a school that has an integrative piece. My identity is as a Christian and also as a psychologist, and I wanted to have an education that kind of could combine both of them and make it so that I could work with a really wide range of people. So that kind of is my context, is both psychology but also kind of a faith-based piece of my education as well that I bring into my work with most of my clients. My doctoral internship was at Georgia Tech. I worked in their counseling center with their undergraduate and graduate students. And then the last year I was working at Northside Hospital in their outpatient behavioral health clinic. I finished that in July, and I'm currently working full-time at Atlanta Innovative Counseling Center. I work with individuals and couples, sometimes families, and I primarily work with life transitions is what I'm calling it now, people who are transitioning into college, out of college, into marriage, having kids, changing careers, retiring, kind of all the different life transitions really is what I've found myself kind of specializing in, so to speak. So I see a lot of different people from a lot of different careers and fields and with lots of different backgrounds, and the work is very rich. So that's a little bit about me, and I can answer any questions at any point. Hopefully, yeah, it looks like you could see it. So I'm going to talk a little bit through some kind of general mental health trends. These are like research-backed mental health trends, not just things I came up with. So I'll read kind of these 5, and the bottom graphic is kind of just a bigger picture of the 5. So more than 1 in 5 U.S. adults experience mental illness each year. More than 1 in 20 U.S. adults experience serious mental illness each year. More than 1 in 7 U.S. youth ages 6 to 17 experience a mental health disorder each year. 50% of all lifetime mental illness begins by age 14, and 75% of lifetime mental illness begins by age 24. And then suicide is the second leading cause of death among people ages 10 to 24. So not super bright facts, and the numbers are actually probably larger than this. This is just based on people who report and people who receive diagnoses. So there's likely more, especially in those first 3 categories. It's likely more than that. This is just based on self-report. So good to kind of see the numbers and know that at the very least this is 1 in 5 people. I don't know how many people are in this room. I'm always really bad at at guessing, but we would guess at least a handful in this room based on these numbers. So just kind of good to know that this is in our midst, even if people aren't talking about it. And also gives us kind of somewhere to work from, to know, here's the numbers, where should we start working? This other graphic is more specifically talking about what disorders we're seeing the most of. By far, anxiety and depression are what myself and most practitioners see the most of. So it accounts for about 35% of all disorders that we're seeing. Again, this is for people who meet criteria for diagnosis. Not all practitioners diagnose, so again, the numbers are likely a little bit higher, but anecdotally, this feels very true. I would say probably 80% of what I see is anxiety and depression, which in some ways is good because all of us practitioners kind of specialize in anxiety and depression because it's most of what we're seeing. So if you kind of throw a dart and find a therapist, most of them are going to specialize in either anxiety or depression or both. These other ones, which are a lot smaller numbers, I'll mention a few of these, the co-occurring substance use disorder and mental illness. This number for sure is higher, but this is what the research says for now, 8.1%. So we see a lot of co-occurring. If you have a substance use disorder, or even just substance misuse, but you don't have a disorder, oftentimes there's a mental health disorder that's also present. It's kind of like a chicken or an egg. One came first, or maybe they both started around the same time. So that's really common to see for us as well. The other trends, and these are things that are not from the research, but just kind of in my own anecdotal experience, a lot of increases in social anxiety. I don't like to blame everything on COVID because there's so much more to what's happened in the last 5 years, but a lot of increases in social anxiety, particularly for, I would say, like 10 years old to 30 years old. So a lot of people who were in school at the time, even like undergraduate, they experienced a lot of social anxiety. Now, some of this is regional. So I was in California for a lot of COVID. So California was shut down for a lot longer than other states. So a lot of social anxiety I saw when I was still doing clinical work there. Maybe not as much in states like Georgia, where it was opened up a little bit earlier. So we really see the impact of people having to isolate, that there was an increase in social anxiety, kind of how do I engage with people when I wasn't allowed to engage face-to-face with people for so long, or I had to engage on a screen, which is not totally real interaction. So a lot of increases in social anxiety, and this is in older adults too, but we see it a lot in young adults. Increased isolation. Again, this is somewhat COVID, somewhat not. I think for most of us, or a lot of us, our instinct when things feel hard is, I don't want to talk, or I want to isolate, or I want to kind of go inward and not discuss this with people. And we see a lot of I see this with a lot of my clients, regardless of what they're coming in with, is the instinct to isolate. And it's counterproductive usually. The antidote really is connection. So whether that's with a friend or a professional or someone from church, connection is actually really what is most helpful for us when we're struggling. And I'll talk some more about this. A lot of social comparison. In this time, a lot of this is social media. So for those of you who aren't on social media, you're probably better off than those who are. Again, this is, of course, a strong trend in our younger people where social media is everything to them. There's some great things about social media, but there's a lot of really non-helpful things. One of the helpful things, I think, is decreased stigma, and I think this is larger than just social media. I think by and large in society, we're a bit more open now to talking about mental health, or at least hearing about it, which is great. But there can also be some misinformation. A lot of diagnoses get thrown around. People are this personality disorder, or people are this thing, and that's not super helpful either, to start to point fingers with diagnosing other people who we don't know very well. So there can be some great things social media-wise, but also some things that aren't super helpful. I'll pause here. Any questions or anything anyone wants to add to anything so far? Okay. How's my pace? Too fast? Good? Okay. I come from a line of fast talkers, so I always like to check in. Okay, so these are some more general factors impacting mental health. Some of these certainly change as society and context changes, but most of these are always going to impact mental health, both positively and negatively. So I'll kind of go through some of these. So the first one is social, so how our social life is, and this doesn't just mean spending time with friends. This can be, who do I live with, or if I live alone, how often am I seeing other people? How often am I connecting with people? Being a part of a church community, I'm always so happy when my clients are, because it's a layer of support and connection that's kind of built into people's lives. So you all are already at least maybe one step ahead of some people, having at least one layer of connection. Professional help, of course, is kind of another layer. If you have that can be a social support, so to speak. Stress, of course, is pretty much the largest thing that's going to impact our mental health. There's something called the diathesis stress model, which basically means when you combine stress with some sort of genetic or risk factor, it's going to increase our instances of mental health concerns. So you could have a lot of great things going, and then you have a really, really stressful event, and it just kind of turns something on inside of us where we might start to struggle with something like anxiety or like depression that we hadn't struggled with before. So this is, I didn't come up with this also. This is used in a lot of our theory about where mental health comes from. Socioeconomic factors are ginormous in the prevalence of mental health. So when I worked at Northside, I worked primarily with financial assistance people, which means that Northside covers most or all of their medical and any sort of mental health care, which is a great thing they provide. But most of these patients were really low income, didn't have a job, couldn't get a job, struggled to put food on the table, like really large survival concerns. For the most part, it's natural that then you're gonna have some mental health concerns because it's very stressful, of course, to have any sort of survival needs that you can't meet for yourself or for your family. So it's very, very common if you find yourself in a place of like some of these things I've listed, poverty or job loss, or you lost some sort of payment, or your salary went down, or you have financial obligations maybe that you didn't have before. Maybe you're taking care of a child or a parent or someone else. Any sort of financial stress can really impact our ability to take care of ourselves, because sometimes the only thing we have time for is to work or to figure out a way to provide for ourselves and our families. So this is a huge, huge, huge piece. If someone has some socioeconomic stress, it's not uncommon that they're gonna have some mental health concerns, and not necessarily that they're gonna meet criteria for a mental health diagnosis, but there might be some concern there. Another factor in a lot of this, the jury's out. We don't know a ton about, like, this gene causes this specific mental illness. We know that there's certainly are genetic factors for a lot of mental health disorders. If you have a family history of mental health concerns, that doesn't mean that you will, but you have a little bit more likelihood than someone who maybe doesn't have a family history of mental health concerns. Of course, a personal history of mental illness or mental health concerns makes it a little more likely that at another point in your life you might struggle again. Comorbid physical health concerns. So at Northside, I also saw mostly oncology patients, so a lot of people who either had been or were currently going through cancer treatment. Very, very common to then have some level of depression or anxiety or something more, because you're facing potentially a life-altering illness, even if it's not something like cancer, high blood pressure, diabetes, anything really that is a physical health concern can increase our chances of having a mental health concern, because it's stressful and it's sad to have things happening in our physical body that we can't control or that we can't predict. So that's a really huge risk factor as well for mental health concerns. Any questions or thoughts about any of these? Yes, and someone will give you a microphone.
My name is Doug. I'm a retired licensed MSW. Most of my experience was in the state of Iowa and with family members in the state of Wisconsin. What concerns me down here in Georgia is wraparound services. You would not believe the difference between here and Iowa and Wisconsin. Is NAMI considering pushing any legislation to improve that in the state of Georgia, to your knowledge?
That's a great question for NAMI. I have no idea. Can you tell me more what you mean, like wraparound services, what you mean by that and why that's concerning to you?
I'll just be honest. Our daughter deals with mental health issues. In the state of Wisconsin, she was eligible to have somebody come to the house once a week to help her get her medication, to help her be organized, just to help her through life issues. It was not like an MSW. It was, I'll use the term layperson. Most of them had a little more than a high school education, but they were trained how to come into the home and help somebody. So that's what I mean by wraparound services. There's people available that you can call at any time, like crisis lines, et cetera, where you can get additional help that you don't wear out your family members. Because as you and I know, often these people become estranged from their family members because family members can't handle it anymore. Extra counseling if needed, that type of thing. That's what I mean by wraparound services. Also, in my experience, even with these 2 states I mentioned that I've practiced in, getting medication with the new laws about pain relievers and that sort of thing, sometimes because pharmacies have to follow the state regulations, pharmacies can't give these people medication for 3-4 days. And sometimes the person doesn't have any medication, which makes things 10 times worse than they could be. So, I mean, in my experience, those are just some things that I feel like they're holes that need to be taken care of.
Totally. I totally agree with you. I think with managed care or with any sort of mental health care that comes from insurance, there's a lot of issues. Because the truth is, and this is something that bears having its own presentation, but the truth is that while there is a lot more information about mental health, we know that it's important, we know that it matters. Insurance and like medical institutions are not there yet where they need to be. And that's from the top down. So that impacts patients, that impacts providers. We get paid like half as much from insurance as what our normal fees are. So insurance and medical institutions, which is so much of our care, is really, truly behind. It's better, I think, probably than it used to be, but it's really, really behind, which means that people who can't afford private care, like, again, some of these socioeconomic factors, or, I mean, it's a luxury to see a private therapist. It's a luxury to be able to pay out of pocket. You may not get as good of care from an insurance institution, which is horrible. So there's a lot, I totally agree with you. There's a lot of gaps. There's a lot of work to be done. And I think we have a long ways to go. And it's hard because people who really care want to be seeing clients, not having to lobby for better mental health care for themselves or for their clients. So that's a really good point, and something that bears talking about is that there's so many gaps in institutions that care, I think, to some degree about mental health, but it's not at the place that it needs to be, certainly. Does that kind of hit what you're talking about? Okay. Anyone else at this stage? Any questions or comments?
It's not about this slide, but earlier you mentioned lifelong mental health conditions diagnosed by age 14. Do you have a sense of what percentage of mental health issues are lifelong versus episodic or periodic in nature?
It's a good question. I don't know exactly what the research would say. I can speak anecdotally that for most people, even if it's something that's not a super serious condition, maybe it's depression or anxiety, which we don't consider to be lifelong, things like a personality disorder or a thought disorder, like something like schizophrenia, we consider lifelong, of course, because there's no cure. So those types of things, for sure, we consider to be lifelong. Now, the progression of it or the expression of it certainly can change and get better. But things like anxiety and depression, certainly we see people have lulls of months or years where they don't struggle at all, or they struggle really minimally, and then a really stressful life event comes in and it comes back. I've yet to see people who struggled at some point and then never struggled again with a mental health concern. So whether that's considered lifelong or just it's a reoccurring issue, or you might have reoccurring episodes, again, if you get the right support, if you have the right coping skills, it can certainly help to have that not be as extreme or as severe. But for sure, the lifelong ones are going to be more our personality disorders, thought disorders, which again is things like schizophrenia, like the more severe is the more lifelong. Does that kind of answer it? I know that's not like a super round answer for you. Kind of, okay. Okay, we'll move on and we'll have a little more time to talk. So now we'll talk about some of the brighter things, which is ways that we can support ourselves. This is not an exhaustive list, but just kind of something to get us started. So this isn't the most important, it's just what I put first, which is apps. So there's lots of apps for breathing techniques or meditation or mindfulness that can be really helpful just kind of in the day-to-day, because we often forget to breathe or we forget to turn off our brains for a little bit. And so apps like, if it's too small, it's Headspace, Calm app, and Breathwork. The O is missing on purpose. That's how they spell it. So those three are really helpful. The first two, the Headspace and Calm app, I would say are the most popular that people use, and there's a lot of free resources on there for, again, relaxation or just grounding yourself when you're feeling really stressed or really overwhelmed. So that's always kind of a nice additive to other resources. Of course, therapy. I can't come here and not say that therapy is not helpful. I don't think everyone has to do therapy or everyone needs to be in therapy for their whole lives. The goal actually is for people to graduate from therapy. Lots of kinds of therapy, of course, individual, couples, family, group therapy. There's intensive outpatient therapies for people who really need that more intense treatment to get kind of back to a stable place. Of course, lots of substance use treatments everywhere, but there's actually a lot here in this area. And then, of course, there's inpatient psychiatric help too if it's really severe. Social support, again, I will beat the dead horse with this because it's so important. People who have social support are so much better off than those who don't, even if it's just one person, one trusted friend or spouse or family member or whoever. So ways to support your mental health can be as simple as connecting with a friend, going to church, and having even just a minor interaction with someone, any sort of pastoral care. I didn't put this on here, but it's super important. Spiritual practices for people who that feels like an important part of their identity and their practice. Prayer, reading your Bible, like those things are all ways that you can support your mental health. We can have all the things. It doesn't have to just be therapy. There's lots of other things that can be super helpful. Community engagement. So again, that could be church, that could be volunteering, that can be going to work and having good social interactions. So you figuring out kind of what's the right amount of social support for you. Some of us, I'm an extrovert, so I need a lot of social interaction. My husband is super introverted, so he doesn't need a lot. So figuring out what works for you, what you need, and I'll have a little time for engagement on this piece too. And then general self-care. All these things are ways for you to support your own, of course, physical health, but also mental health, physical fitness, so being active in a way that feels good to you, nutrition, putting good things into your body as much as possible. Play. We don't do this usually once we're not kids anymore, but doing things that are just fun, not because we have to, not because we get a grade or a report card or our boss is telling us to do it, but just doing things that are fun for you, just for the sake of it being fun. And then work-life balance. So if you work or if you volunteer, how does that balance feel in your life? Does it feel like I do way too much work, or I'm home way too much and I don't feel like I have this good balance? Finding that is really important, which will bring us into a little bit of an engagement/connection break. You don't have to answer all of these, and you don't have to share with people around you. It could be helpful because we'll be connecting, which is great. But these are some questions for you all to think about right now and maybe even after this. What's one way you can engage with your social supports this week? Or if you feel like I'm a rock star at this, how are you already doing this? How do you feel about your work-life balance right now, or just how does the balance of your life feel? And then what's one play activity that you can add to your life? So if you're comfortable, spend like a couple of minutes talking to the person next to you, maybe? How does that sound? Maybe? Or think about it for yourself if you don't want to share with the person next to you. Okay, maybe one more minute, kind of wrap up whatever thought you have. Okay, let's come back together. Sounds like a lot of great conversations.
You may have to be a little more forceful.
Okay, if we could wrap up.
Ding, ding, ding.
Perfect. Okay, well, it sounds like people were connecting, which is great. And the good thing is you can keep having these conversations. Maybe a couple people, anything you want to share that you thought about for yourself. And you don't have to if you don't want. Let's hear it. Play.
I would like 10 ideas of people playing that might be helpful to me.
Okay. What do other people do for play?
Yeah, real play, not sit back and have something done to you.
Of course. Anyone, what are your play activities? Yeah.
Well, can play also be like, I love to read,
Yeah.
And I know
Yep.
I love to read, and
Yeah.
often I'm reading work stuff, and I've found that I do much, like I'm reading a book right now that's just a lot of fun to read.
Yeah. Reading can totally be play.
Yeah.
Yes. So reading, yes.
It's
Nine
called
more.
Scout.
If
Yeah.
you just shout it out, I can repeat it. Yeah, go ahead. Gardening is another one. Mahjong.
Anything outdoors.
Anything outdoors, sure. Hiking, walking, just breathing in the crisp air. Cooking, yes. Great. I don't know if that was 10, Judy, but close, right? So yeah, play is so important, and you are likely already doing a lot of these things. And so even just kind of reframing like, oh yeah, I'm doing this thing. This is good for me. This is good for my mental health. It's good to even have a reframe of the things that we're already doing, knowing that we're doing good things for our mental health. Okay. Just to wrap up here, so AICC, Atlanta Innovative Counseling Center, is the group practice that I work at. I have these, maybe I'll put them at the back of the room so you don't have to come up here to grab them, but I have all our resources listed here on the bigger pamphlet, and then the small cards are my own. This is some of our resources. We have about 20 therapists, so you name it, and someone probably does it. Individual, group, and couples therapy, play therapy, which is for kids, but we should have adult play therapy now that we're talking about it. We have psychological assessments, nutrition counseling, family therapy, art therapy. A lot of our clinicians work with young kids. There's a handful of us, including myself, that works with adults. So if you have friends or family members or acquaintances that may be looking for something, likely we can do it. We work out of Smyrna, kind of near the Vinings area, but a lot of us do virtual care as well. So for people who are not as close or don't want to make the drive, we have options. I think that's it, yeah. So any questions, or comments or anything I can answer, and I'll also be here afterwards if you don't want to ask in front of everyone.
Well, first of all, thank you. That was a great presentation. I spent the last 4 days at a conference in San Francisco, which was lovely, by the way. There's still issues, but they fixed a lot of the problems. But anyhow, synthetic or artificial intelligence was a big part of that conference. Mm-hmm. And when, I wonder, and they probably don't have good statistics on this, if technology is a mental health problems or challenges accelerator. Mm-hmm. And with the synthetic intelligence, it's going to be more and more and more in the atmosphere, just all around us.
Yeah.
And I'm wondering if you have sort of recommendations on best practices on interacting with technology, those types of things that might be helpful for all of us to know.
Yeah, that's a great question. I came and spoke to the youth group, and we talked about that too, because someone asked a question about AI. I think, having healthy limits. Again, usually this is harder for kids who haven't worked out the parts of their brain to have self-control yet, and we can struggle with this as adults too. I think knowing when it's becoming too much for you, whether that means I just spent an hour reading articles or scrolling on something and I had no clue that much time passed, kind of being more aware of what your personal engagement is. Again, technology is not all bad. I think a lot of it's bad, personally, but it's not all bad. So I think knowing for yourself, and there's no perfect solution here, but I think knowing, okay, I'm spending way too much time on this. I just had to check myself. I was like, I'm spending way too much time on this. I'm gonna delete the apps that I'm spending so much time on, and maybe I'll come back to them, maybe not. So kind of being able to check in with yourself, or having someone who holds you accountable. I see you on your phone all the time. Do you think there's maybe something we can do here? That's with this usually feels like the biggest issue is the phone for most people. So that's usually where my mind goes, and for most of my clients, that's usually where we run into issues is with the phone. I know it's not a perfect answer, but that's like some thoughts. And hopefully AI doesn't take my job. I think we're a long ways away from that, hopefully.
So I just read an article this morning about therapy chatbots, and it was interesting coming into this, worrying about when you're just talking about isolation and all
Totally.
of that, and then how does that same world say, oh, but here's an AI
Totally.
companion to walk you through all your problems?
Totally, yeah. And some people find genuine help from that. But again, it's missing that human connection, which is what we're made to have, is human connection. And it's not a human at the end of the day. Even if maybe some people it feels like it is, it's not. And so reminding yourself, coming back down to earth, that human interaction is still really important. Again, you don't have to throw your phones out, but just reminding yourself that human interaction can be important. Any other questions? I know we're have maybe a few more minutes before people have to head out. Or comments? Yeah.
Just a quick question about funding.
Uh-huh.
As with any other medical issue, I assume there are funding issues as well in the mental health arena. Can you describe what's going on there and what maybe some of the fixes should look like?
Yeah. I was trying to find some like cold research on this, and I wasn't able to find any that felt true or didn't really make sense. Huge funding issue, as we talked about a little bit earlier, like not enough in mental health. We have a lot more of our health insurance money going to physical health concerns, which the ideal is to have for both. Like we shouldn't have to take away from one to add to the other. So funding is a huge concern, both in the private space, which for the most part I'm in right now, and when I was in public spheres, funding it's just minimal. So people can't see a therapist maybe for more than 6 or 7 sessions. For some people that's great. For some people they need a lot more than that. I wish I knew the answer. If I did, I would be like running to, I don't know, Congress or whoever makes those rules. To figure out how we can fund this. I think that's a large reason why it's still such an enduring issue, is that people can't get all the care that they need. So there's no answer, but yes, funding is an issue, like a major issue. There's lots of places you can donate, and there's a lot of really good foundations that will support people. But at large, I guess, like vote for people who are actually making a difference with mental health. A lot of it's lip service, so even if they say they are, maybe they're not. But yeah, there's no good answer. I'm sort of a pessimist with the whole funding question. Sorry. Sorry about that.
Thank you for everything. I just wanted to say I am like really open about my struggles with mental health, and so I'm happy to talk to anybody anytime. I've been through a lot, and I have tried to like invoke the Mental Health Parity Act here in Georgia for insurance to cover some of my therapies, and it's failed every time. I've tried to invoke it in work environments, and it's failed every time. So I just feel so lucky that my family was able to like pay for me to be here today. And if anyone ever wants to be like fiery, passionate about lobbying, I'm here with you.
Yeah. Thanks for sharing. Yeah, and there's lots of, including people at my practice, including myself, there's lots of us who offer what's called sliding scale. So people who can't afford our full fee, there's a lot of therapists who will slide down to whatever makes sense. Seeing early career therapists is always cheaper. So if there's people who are interns, which they still have training, they're equipped to see you, they just are earlier in their career, that's always a cheaper option when it comes to seeing private practitioners. And then, yeah, some insurances will cover, some won't. A lot of providers, we don't do insurance because they don't pay us. So, and we have student loans. So it's hard because there's not as many practitioners as we would need in the insurance setting.